Hello science fans and welcome to SHE-ensya. Today I present a special episode made for the UST SHS Capstone Pass last March 9, 2021. And it talks about how to deal with difficulties that we encounter along our innovation paths in science and technology.
It's going to be a bumpy ride!
Looking back at my journey and misadventures, I can't help but ask, why did I choose STEM? The quickest answer is because of my father. He was an engineer, was well respected among his peers, and it was a dream to be like him. But as a lonely, strange child hanging out at the attic of our home, I can still clearly remember the scenes playing in my head as I read science fiction books. So it was fiction on paper and on film, ringing more true than fact, that lured me into the arms of STEM, pushing me to the Philippine Science High School system and the Molecular Biology and Biotechnology program of UP. My academic journey was far from smooth. Studying in UP was highly competitive, and it led to many sleepless nights that barely got me passing grades. I shifted out of my master's program because I didn't know what I wanted to do at that point. So I really started building my identity as a researcher when I started my PhD in 2012. And after an ego-busting experience through my undergrad and even my master's, I still had a rough start for my PhD. It took me several months of doing 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. in the lab, Mondays to Saturdays, before any of my setups started working. It was horrible, and whatever was left of my self-esteem vanished in those days. One of the few things that kept me going was a promise I made to the fishermen who helped me a couple of months back about their problem with mud crabs. You see, my dissertation was on the population genetic structure of alimango, also known as mud crabs, under the genus Scylla. And when I, clumsy and scared, went out on field to get my first samples, the fishermen of Bataan were more than helpful, without asking for anything in return, except a promise that I helped them identify juvenile mangrove crabs for their fish ponds. The Philippines has 3 of the 4 species of mangrove or mud crabs. They have overlapping boundaries, and so when fishers catch them, it is often a random mix of the king, purple, and red mangrove crabs. But of the 3, only the king mangrove crab is preferred due to its fast growth rate and larger sizes upon maturity. But the problem is, it is difficult to differentiate juveniles into species. And so fishermen compensate for projected loss by either overharvesting or overbuying, and thus putting a strain on our ecosystem and on their already limited resources. So while I was wallowing in my perceived failure as a scientist, the puzzle of how to identify the species of juvenile mangrove crabs stayed in my mind. At one point, I really thought that staring at mangrove crabs won't do me much good. But after staring for long enough, I realized that there were tools I could use to see what the naked eye couldn't. So I used a combination of morphometrics, DNA barcoding, and image analysis to look for patterns in the shapes of juvenile crab shells that are unique to each species. And I found one at the crown of their shells called the frontal lobe spines. It was so simple, and I was so lucky to have found it. Even though it felt like an accident, my advisor was so excited with my findings that she asked me to enter the DOSTP SHERD's Outstanding Research and Development Competition. To be honest, I didn't know why I was asked to enter the competition. What I did was laborious but uncomplicated. It was needed, but not necessarily cutting edge or flashy to merit an award. But I was a good soldier, so I followed orders, I submitted our paper, and did my very best during the presentation. And so a couple of months later, we won the top prize at the 2015 Outstanding Research and Development Awards of DOSTP SHERD. And I was so surprised that our simple innovation could merit recognition from such an esteemed institution. What I didn't know then was that I was suffering from imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is an internal experience where you believe that you are not as competent as what others think you to be. It is often narrowly applied to intelligence and achievements, but it has linked to perfectionism in the social context. It is us being our worst enemy, amplifying every single thing that we did wrong, and using these mistakes to justify our fear of claiming opportunities that we deserve as much as others do. So to counter this, my first advice is to find a community that empowers you. This could be friends or family, but in my case, what I found most helpful were a set of colleagues and advisors who weren't afraid to tell me when I was messing up, but were still there to help me correct my mistakes and also kept their faith in me and pushed me towards opportunities I would otherwise have been afraid to take. So buoyed by the support and belief of my tribe, I went on to pursue greater and scarier things. I took a detour from my PhD and did a dissertation research at the University of Seattle in Washington through a Fulbright grant. At that time, I was fascinated with sex identification in mangrove crabs and how fishers and local vendors would have three classifications with three price points. Until now, the females are priced higher than males, but the baklang alimango, which we called the intermediate crab, was priced even higher. To differentiate the three, females typically have wide, darkly pigmented abdominal flaps, while males have narrow, unpigmented abdominal flaps. The intermediate is partially widened and partially pigmented. The characters of the abdominal flap of the intermediate crab actually fits those of the immature female. However, their sizes were much larger than their immature counterparts. The existence of the intermediate crab may be attributed to the inherent nature of the crab or the environment where it grew up. High temperatures typical in the tropics have been shown to speed up the appearance of maturity, while heavy metals and organic pollutants have been reported to mimic sex hormones and cause developmental changes in the sex of crabs. But if temperature and pollutants have some effect on the existence of intermediate crabs, then differences in frequency should be observed in locations with various environmental conditions. But our preliminary study showed no significant difference in the occurrence of intermediates per site, per surface water temperature variation, nor per pollution level. Now for me, this was an experiment that could potentially lead to genome-wide association studies that could help explain why these organisms grow bigger or mature later compared to their cohorts. But it led to conversations about gender equality and how nature does not revolve in a simple dichotomy of sexes. And so what I would like to posit at this point is that science goes beyond the perceived boundaries that we create. It cannot be fully neutral nor completely apolitical. It can be used to serve or to hurt. It can be used to help or to oppress. So let us be mindful of how our science will be used, and let us, ourselves, not exist in a vacuum defined by the walls of our laboratories. And so right now, we are busy with a project deploying our mangrove crab technologies to various fishing communities all over the country. To learn more about them, you can visit our website at crabtech.ph. Our initial plans to do a whirlwind tour of the Philippine coastal communities was derailed by the COVID-19 pandemic. And quite frankly, it really hit me hard. We worked so diligently to reach this point, and then all of a sudden we have this insurmountable roadblock that we all had to face. I had to go back to the heart of what we wanted to do, to communicate science more effectively, to consult our stakeholders about the technologies that we created, and include them in the future decision-making that we had to do about the future of S&T in our lab. So I pivoted and created a science channel. SHE-ensya is a channel dedicated to sharing information about research in the Philippines and all over the world. I use it as a platform to encourage critical thinking about current events, that affect and are affected by science. It is also a place I talk about things I love, be it art, literature, and popular media within the science fantasy genre. In the short time that I've had this channel, it has changed my life and the way I looked at the world. It has also helped me reevaluate how I do science in this so-called new normal. And so when UNESCO sent out a call for proposals that empowers the youth through citizen science to help solve a problem aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic, we went out and made the Eco Squad Goals initiative. The Eco Squad Goals initiative was inspired by the need for more people to evaluate and change their consumption patterns to lessen the generation of plastic waste. And so for a month, we had about 100 participants with all hands on deck, evaluating their online consumption patterns, focusing on the generation of their plastic waste through online shopping and food deliveries. We've had amazing students segregate their plastic wastes at home and collect critical data needed to assess how much plastic waste a Filipino household accumulates from online shopping and food deliveries during the holidays. And through it, we found out just how much we are hurting the environment through our consumption choices, and how powerful the youth can be if we focus on a particular goal. And that's how the COVID-19 pandemic led me to another interesting research journey. With this, I would like to emphasize that we have to take our own unique paths at our own unique times. So let us not be dissuaded or intimidated by the achievements of others, or worse, our own self-imposed deadlines. Thank you so much for joining us in this special episode. I hope you were able to learn something from our short video on how to deal with bumpy roads and detours in life. If you did, I hope you can give this video a thumbs up and also subscribe to our channel. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please don't hesitate to message me, your resident Filipino scientist, in the comments section below. Thank you very much, and see you around!